Chapter 12, Still More Ways of Thinking Yourself Out of Your Anger. REBT, a pioneering thinking approach to personality theory and psychotherapy, has a very strong and integrated emotive and behavioral aspects. We have thus far only presented one main cognitive procedure for examining and uprooting angry thoughts and feelings. That is D, or disputing of irrational beliefs, or IBs. Although disputing is complex and includes debating and discriminating, it represents only one philosophic approach to anger. If you really work at disputing strongly, intensively, and persistently, you may not need other cognitive methods for disclosing and dislodging your IBs. Yet, REBT therapists over the years have discovered several other methods to help you examine and reduce your self-defeating thinking. Let us now describe some important variations on rethinking your anger. Using the disputing irrational beliefs, DIBS, exercise. First, you can use the technique we call disputing irrational beliefs, or DIBS, which gives you a more systematic way of taking one of your absolutistic ideas and systematically ripping it up many times until you no longer tend to subscribe to it. Like several other REBT methods, you do DIBS occasionally or do it steadily, say for a few minutes a day for a number of days in a row. I, AE, have outlined the general DIBS technique in the revised edition of How to Live with a Neurotic, in the final chapter of A Guide to Rational Living, and in a separate pamphlet published by the Albert Ellis Institute. Let us present it here as you can specifically apply it to your anger. Let us suppose for once that Jack and Joan promised to share an apartment with you, have persuaded you to go to considerable expense to fix it up, and then have unfairly and irresponsibly backed out of the deal and refused to move in with you or to reimburse you for the trouble and expense you have taken. You feel extremely angry at them, and you soon see in the ABC model of REBT that your primary IB that creates your anger is, they absolutely should not have treated me that unfairly. You now use DIBS to question and challenge this thought. In using DIBS, you ask yourself the following questions, and preferably write down each question on a sheet of paper, and also write down your answers so that you can review and add to them. Question 1. What IB do I want to dispute and surrender? Illustrative answer. They absolutely should not have treated me that unfairly. Question 2. Can I rationally support this belief? Illustrative answer. No, I don't think that I can. Question 3. What evidence exists for the inaccuracy of this belief? Illustrative answer. Number 1. Perhaps they didn't even act that unfairly to me. True, I see their action as completely wrong and irresponsible, but they may have, and others may have, a different view of this matter, and their view may have some validity. So I don't even know that I can be 100% certain of their wrongness and irresponsibility. Answer number 2. Assuming that I can prove my normal moral standards, by normal moral standards, that they did behave wrongly and unfairly to me, what law of the universe says that they should or must not behave that way? That they have to act fairly? None. Although I and other people see it as right and proper for them to act fairly to me, they definitely don't have to do so. Answer number 3. If they should have or must have treated me fairly instead of unfairly, they would have done so, for how could they avoid doing what they must do? The fact that they didn't treat me fairly seems to prove conclusively that there is no reason why they must have done so. Answer number 4. When I tell myself they should not have treated me that unfairly, I really seem to mean that A, the conditions that existed at the time they treated me that way should not have existed, and B, they should not have allowed them if they did exist. But of course, the conditions of their lives, their history, their personality, their biological makeup, etc., did exist at the time they treated me unfairly. And if these conditions did exist, how could they not have gone along with them as I demand? Suppose, let us say, their parents strongly objected to the very thing I wanted them to do, and suppose that they, because of their undue attachment to these parents, went along with their objections and decided to cop out of our arrangement. By my statement, they should have not treated me that unfairly. I actually insist that their parents must not have their objections and or that they should not go along with them. But how can I legitimately make their parents give up their objections or make them ignore their parents? Naturally, I can't. Answer number 5. By demanding that they not treat me unfairly, I actually seem to believe the statement because they theoretically could have not acted in that unfair manner. They actually should not have acted that way. But this statement clearly is a non sequitur. Its conclusion doesn't logically follow its premise. No matter how true it may seem that they theoretically could have chosen not to have treated me unfairly, that never means that they therefore actually must choose to act fairly. Answer number 6. In demanding that they treat me fairly, I really devoutly believe the proposition, because I strongly want them to act that way, they have to give me what I want. But how valid does that proposition appear? Clearly invalid. Number 7. I also seem to believe that because I have treated them quite fairly throughout our dealings, they should and must treat me with equal fairness. Another nutty idea. Answer number 8. I see them as bad people for treating me badly, but even if I can prove to virtually everyone's satisfaction that they did treat me unfairly and shabbily, I inaccurately overgeneralize when I label them, their entire personhood, as a bad for treating me in this vile manner. They almost certainly have some good traits too. How, therefore, can I legitimately define them as no good? Answer number 9. When I say they should not have treated me that unfairly, I hypothesize by using this should and absolutistic must. I don't say they preferably should treat me fairly or they most probably would get better results for themselves and society if they treated me and others fairly. I dogmatize and absolutize that they must treat me fairly. But as far as I know, I can prove no absolutes, and inventing them and feeling completely convinced of their truth is futile. Answer number 10. While I cannot prove the truth of my belief they should not have treated me that unfairly, I can prove that if I continue to subscribe to this belief, I will in all probability feel very angry at them and continue to feel enraged for perhaps months or years to come, thus interfering with my chances of dealing with them effectively. Although my anger-creating statements seem unprovable, the evil result of my devoutly believing them appear eminently provable. Therefore, I had better give them up. And answer number 11. By demanding that they must treat me fairly, I imply that I can stand their unfair treatment of me and that I can only survive and lead a happy existence if some force of the universe makes them correct their erroneous ways and begin to treat me fairly. Obviously, my ideas in this respect are hokum, for although I'll never like their unfair treatment, I can certainly stand it, and if I stop foolishly making myself enraged at them, I can have a long and reasonably happy life in spite of their past, present, and future unfairness. Question number 4. Does any evidence exist of the accuracy of my belief about Jack and Joan, of my assumption that they should not have treated me unfairly and that they are bad people for doing what they should not have done? Illustrative answer. No. No good evidence that I can think of. I can obtain some data showing that they treated me unfairly by probably getting a consensus from many other people that they did so. I can therefore contend that their behavior is bad or immoral, but I don't have any evidence whatever that they are bad people because of that behavior. So, at most, my belief about them is only partially accurate, and significant aspects of it appear highly exaggerated and essentially inaccurate. Question number 5. What bad things can actually happen to me if Joan and Jack continue to treat me unfairly? Illustrative answer. 1. I will not be reimbursed for the time, trouble, and money I have spent fixing up the apartment they agreed to share with me, and will therefore continue to suffer real inconvenience as a result of their withdrawing from our agreement. 2. They may possibly give people a false impression of our differences and convince them that they acted correctly and that I acted wrongly. This would blacken my name and reputation. Number 3. As a result of their disliking me, and perhaps inducing others to dislike me too, I suffer more inconveniences. Number 4. Living in my new apartment by myself or having to share it with someone else as a result of their backing out of their agreement with me may well prove highly annoying. Number 5. I may continue to have hassles with them, particularly if we remain in contact in the future. Even if we somehow resolve our differences, we all will tend to have a bad taste in our mouths and will lose our previous degree of trust and friendship. All of these things will be bad if they occur, but they will not be terrible and awful. I can stand them and still lead a reasonably happy life. Question number 6. What good things can happen or can I make happen even if Jack and Joan continue to treat me unfairly and I can't stop them from doing so? Illustrative answers. Number 1. I can gain in assertiveness by confronting them with their unfairness and by trying to get them, even though unsuccessfully, to change their attitude and behavior toward me. 2. I can actually enjoy living by myself or finding another person to share my new apartment. Number 3. The time and energy that I now spend in maintaining a friendship with them can put toward doing friendly things with others and enjoying myself in other ways. 4. I can practice my discussing and arguing skills through attempting to get them to see things differently and to change their unfair actions towards me. And number 5, I can use this unfair situation with them as a challenge to work on my own attitudes, to acknowledge that I largely create my own rage when others mistreat me, to change my anger-creating philosophy of life, and to prepare myself for more constructive action and less destructive rage and temper tantrums in the future when other people treat me unfairly. The DIBS exercise simply organizes some of the more important aspects of disputing IBs when obnoxious or unwanted situations arise. It consists of a systematic approach to disputing through a particular set of questions that you keep using whenever you feel emotionally upset at sea. You can apply DIBS, of course, to feelings of anxiety, depression, despair, self-pity, low frustration tolerance, as well as anger. As you have already noted, this technique encourages a concerted, methodical approach, aims at your using it regularly, and encourages you to do it in writing or with the use of a voice recorder so that you can keep reviewing your previous disputing and improve it. Using referenting or highlighting the costs of self-defeating behaviors. Another cognitive method of uprooting IBs consists of a technique invented by Joseph Danish and outlined in his book, Stop Without Quitting. It uses the principles of general semantics originated by Alfred Korzybski. Korzybski notes that virtually all humans naturally and easily overgeneralize and often invent misleading meanings. They consequently tend to defeat themselves and behave unhealthily by making inaccurate conclusions resulting from their poor language semantic usage. Several of Korzybski's followers, such as Wendell Johnson and S.I. Hayakawa, have applied his teachings to the field of emotional disturbance, and much of their thinking has been incorporated into REBT, which several authorities describe as one of the leading semantic therapies. As stated, Joseph Danish's theory embodies these principles of semantic overgeneralization, and in his referenting technique, he provides you with a practical thinking tool for attending to some of your IBs and give you a hard-headed method of changing them. As applied to the problem of anger, you can use the referenting technique as follows. Suppose you feel exceptionally angry whenever you hear about someone who has made you angry in the past, and suppose you now want to reduce your irate feelings. Telling yourself, don't feel angry, won't really work. If anything, you may succeed only in suppressing your anger. You will not undo it. Your emotional problem here probably consists of your poor referenting or confusing your ideas about the person's behavior with your ideas about the person himself in a sloppy, bigoted, and overgeneralized manner. Thus, if someone else asks you to give the meanings or associations that immediately pop into your head when you think of the person's behavior, you will probably say something like, his behavior is no good, rotten, unfair, horrible, and evil. He is a no good individual, a rotten person who is always unfair. He is someone whom I particularly cannot tolerate. This type of exclusive, one-sided, and overgeneralized merging of the terms describing a person's behavior with the person himself probably will cause you to feel exceptionally hostile towards him. As long as you insist on making this connection, you will find it almost impossible to reduce your angry feelings and view your opponent's behavior in a more accurate light. Danish's technique on referenting forces you to go beyond your prejudiced one-sidedness about people's behavior and use several better terms to describe both people and their actions. Referenting consists of taking a relatively vague word such as behavior and forcing yourself to list the much more specific reference or concrete descriptions that comprise it. Danish's method particularly encourages you to bring to your own attention many of the diverse meanings of a term instead of a few limited and prejudiced meanings. For example, when thinking specifically of someone's, say a friend's, poor behavior, write a list of negative terms to describe that behavior, such as rotten, no good, unfair, horrible, awful, evil, and lousy. Then, on the same sheet of paper, go out of your way to think of and write down any terms which you might think of to describe the positive and good aspects of her behavior, such as fair most of the time, if not this time. Probably fair from her own point of view, if not mine. Acts in her own self-interest as I do. Forthright, determined, assertive, sometimes very nice and considerate of other people, concerned with other people in general. Finally, you can write down some of the aspects of her behavior that are neutral, things she does or says that are not good or bad, but just parts of her makeup, such as interested in many aspects of life, highly absorbed in music, not devoted to sports, makes many public presentations. By referencing as accurately and completely as you can all your different ideas about this friend's behavior, you force yourself to keep in mind a more holistic, more accurate, less one-sided view of her in general. Thus, your one-sided view about her behavior, rotten, no good, unfair, horrible, will tend to diminish. You will begin to see it pluralistically and not as you might tend to fictionalize and label it in your mind because of a particular instance of bad behavior. If you force yourself to use this referencing technique, especially when you feel very angry towards someone, you will find that you can de-emphasize her bad traits and thus start to acquire a much more enlightened, accurate, and realistic view of that person. Referencing won't make you automatically forgiving and unangry with all people whom you encounter and accepting of the nasty actions they perform against you, but it frequently will help. When you get into the habit of doing it, you will tend to find after a while that you stop making yourself as often and as intensely angry as you now feel. Using paradoxical intention. Another good method Another good method which you can use both cognitively and behaviorally consists of what Viktor Frankl calls paradoxical intention. Various other therapists use it in different ways and often call it different names. In REBT, we sometimes refer to it as reducing irrational beliefs to absurdity. Using paradoxical intention, you can take any idea and reduce it or enlarge it to absurdity by exaggerating in your mind the wildest implications of the original idea. For instance, if you want someone to do something for you and you make yourself angry because he refuses to cooperate, exaggerate your wish for power and control over him. Of course he has to do what I want him to do. I have absolute control over his behavior. If he tells me that he will jump through hoops to please me and then refuses to go through with his jumping, I can easily put him in chains and whip him until he jumps and jumps and jumps. In fact, if I want him to give me $1 million or to grovel in the dust before me 10 times a day, he has no choice but to do my bidding because I desire him to do anything, whatever. He completely has to do it. And if he refuses, I can immediately send him down to the thunderbolts and annihilate him. If you take the idea of having control over a person to a ridiculous extreme such as this, you will soon see that you really have virtually no control over him and that he has the right to do whatever he wishes, even when he unfairly inconveniences you by exercising that right. You will see that human nature does not exist as you command it to exist. You will then give up your own foolish expectation that people will always behave as you desire. Just as you can use paradoxical intention in your mind as described above, you can also practice it behaviorally. If people treat you unfairly and you feel exceptionally angry, instead of planning to punish them, you can deliberately force yourself to take the opposite track and act very nicely to them. You can, for example, keep befriending them in various ways. Invite them to interesting functions that you know they will enjoy. Do them special favors. Show unusual consideration and kindness towards them. By such paradoxical behavior, you will first of all practice feeling unangry instead of angry. Second, you will, by turning the other cheek in this manner, set them a good example and show them that their unfair treatment doesn't necessarily have to produce rage in any other person. Third, you may encourage them to look again at their behavior and to see how badly they treated you. Finally, you may inspire them to act nicely toward you, even make reparations for their wrongs they have already done you. We do not contend that this kind of turning the other cheek philosophy will always work or is invariably wise, but if you use it judiciously and realize that you do it for paradoxical reasons and not necessarily in every instance where someone treats you unfairly, you may gain considerably by it and help reduce your feelings of rage. Paradoxical intention also may reduce human stubbornness. If people treat you unfairly and you even recognize that they have an emotional problem, you may still perversely continue to feel and act angrily toward them in order to maintain your false integrity, to make yourself feel stronger when in actuality you keep acting weakly. This paradox may occur between you and your parents, for instance, during your childhood. They advise you mainly for your own good to get up promptly when the alarm clock rings in the morning and get yourself off in time for school. You don't like to get up that early, and you lazily, with your low frustration tolerance, resist. But you also see that by resisting, you keep getting into trouble with the school authorities and sabotaging some of your own goals. For example, to get good marks in high school and therefore to get into a good college of your own choice. Perversely, you may tell yourself something like, I won't get up early to please my parents. Damned if I will. That would prove me a ninny who only goes along for their ride. I'll show them. I'll deliberately stay in bed late and prove my strength and follow my own integrity. If you act that way as a child, or for that matter, as an adult, you merely fool yourself. Because your parents advise you to get up early, you foolishly and perversely convince yourself that if you do so, you will follow their rules and do it for them. You consider that kind of rule following a weakness when actually it would be a strength. You strongly resist them and actually act foolishly, weakly when you do. Similarly, often with anger, you may feel furious about unfair treatment and see your fury as self-defeating and perhaps as encouraging others to treat you even more unfairly. Yet, instead of trying to change your commanding philosophy about people's behavior, you may cling to that philosophy and convince yourself that you strongly and rationally feel enraged and that you'd better angrily show offenders their faults. By convincing yourself that to do otherwise would make you weak and lose your own integrity, you choose to persist with your rage even though you partly realize that it is irrational. Actually, to give up your anger while continuing to strongly dislike people's unfair acts would make you much stronger and get you much better results. But if you see it differently and perhaps deliberately make yourself even more enraged and vindictively go after the person who has wronged you, you will continue to feel angry. When you interrupt strong perversity with paradoxical intention and deliberately get yourself to think nicely about and act kindly toward others in spite of their unfairness, you paradoxically fight your own irrationality and tend to give it up. In terms of what you really want for yourself, the good relationships you desire, you can get better results by acting in this paradoxical manner. Rachel Hare outlines another form of paradoxical intention which I, AE, have used to help my clients cut down their angry feelings and actions. It consists of giving yourself limiting conditions under which you can allow yourself to have temper tantrums. One of my clients felt exceptionally irate and combative every time he thought that someone on the street spit in his direction and spewed some spit on him. I persuaded him to contract with himself that he would only let himself get angry when he could prove with clear-cut observational evidence, preferably with the confirmation of others, that some spit had actually landed on him. Since he could rarely prove this, his fits of anger subsided greatly. To use the same paradoxical technique on yourself, pick a set of conditions where you feel you have been treated unfairly and where you frequently feel and act with rage. Deliberately limit this set of conditions. Contract to allow yourself to get angry, for example, only when 1. Everyone agrees that people have truly treated you unfairly. 2. Everyone also agrees that the unfairness has caused you considerable amount of harm. And 3. You can prove that to yourself that you have lost a considerable sum of money by the unfair treatment. If you allow yourself in this paradoxical manner freely to feel and express your rage while also deliberately restricting yourself. You may soon see that you can live with your own restrictions and you actually create your anger yourself, and that you have the power to limit and control it. Such paradoxical techniques work because they stop you from thinking desperately, I must feel angry, or I must not feel angry. They give you a wider range of possible reactions to help you convince yourself that you can function in this wider range. The use of humor. Humor dramatically interrupts your overly serious manner of looking at certain unpleasant events, and thereby needlessly making yourself angry. Jeffrey Diefenbacher, a leading researcher in treating anger, recommends the use of silly humor to reduce rage. As he notes, making fun of your own flying off the handle helps you to step back and rethink some of your rigidly held rage-creating beliefs. REBT therapists frequently use various types of jocularity to help their clients poke fun at their own solemnity and both cognitively and emotionally learn to accept themselves better. IAE gave a now somewhat famous paper, Fun as Psychotherapy, at the annual convention of American Psychological Association in Washington, D.C. in 1976, and made a great hit because I sang two of my rational humorous songs in the course of my presentation. I pointed out in this paper, if human disturbance largely consists of over seriousness, and if, as in rational emotive behavior therapy, therapists had better make a hard-headed attack on some of their clients' silly thinking, what better vehicle for doing this kind of disputing than humor and fun? Let me briefly mention that my therapeutic brand of humor consists of practically every kind of drollery ever invented, such as taking things to extreme, reducing ideas to absurdity, paradoxical intentions, puns, witticisms, irony, whimsy, evocative language, slang, deliberate use of sprightly off-color language, and various other kinds of jocularity. Following this REBT lead, you can frequently laugh at yourself when you see yourself getting angry. Look for the gross exaggeration in your ideas about what others must do to satisfy you and how things should go right to make your life easier, and thereby cognitively and emotionally attack such silly notions. When you demand good behavior in others, you can remind yourself, oh yes, I always accept perfectly well myself. I never treat people unfairly or go back on my promises to them. Well, hardly ever. When you think that you absolutely need others' approval and that they are complete vermin for not giving it to you, remind yourself what a love slob or commander of the world you have made yourself into. When you whine and scream because poor economic, political, or social conditions exist, tell yourself something like, oh, yes, I run the universe, and whatever I want has to, in fact, immediately has to come about. Everyone else has to live with frustration and annoyance, but not me. Call to mind also what we often tell our REBT clients. Life, whether we like it or not, generally is spelled hassle, though taffy. When you demand that you must have certainty and that you can't stand it when you don't have guarantees of success, love, fairness, and ease, tell yourself, I think I'll engrave a beautiful certificate with which absolutely, with no shadow of a doubt, guarantees that I will always get exactly what I want the very second that I want it. Then I'll get along wonderfully well and won't have to feel angry about anything. Keep using humor directed against your nutty ideas, but not, of course, against yourself as a person. And if you want to sing to yourself or others some of the REBT's rational humorous songs, you can use these from the songbook A Garland of Rational Songs. So this song is called Wine, 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 and this is sung to the tune of the Yale Whiffin' Poof song. I cannot have all my wishes filled. Wine, wine, wine. I cannot have every frustration stilled. Wine, wine, wine. Life really owes me the things that I miss. Fate has to grant me eternal bliss. And if I must settle for less than this, wine, wine, wine. All right, perfect rationality to the tune of Luigi Denza's Funiculi Funicula. Some think the world must have a right direction, and so do I, and so do I. Some think that with the slightest imperfection they can't get by, and so do I. For I have to prove I'm superhuman, and better far than people are, to show I have miraculous acumen, and always rate among the great. Perfect, perfect rationality is, of course, the only thing for me. How can I ever think of being, if I must live fallibly? Rationality must be a perfect thing for me. This one is, I wish I were not crazy. To the tune of Dan Emmett's Dixieland. Oh, I wish I were really put together, smooth and fine as patent leather. Oh, how great to be mated to this lovely state. But I'm afraid that I was fated to be rather aberrated. Oh, how sad to be mad, as my mom and my dad. Oh, I wish I were not crazy. Hooray, hooray. I wish my mind were less inclined to be the kind of that's hazy. Of course, I could, of course, decide to be less crazy, but I, alas, am just too blasted lazy. This one is love me, only me, to the tune of Yankee Doodle. So love me, love me, love me, or I'll die without you. Make your love a guarantee so I can never doubt you. Love me totally, and I shall get by, dear. If I must rely on me, I'll hate you till I die, dear. Love me all the time, thoroughly and wholly. Life turns into slush and slime, lest you love me solely. Love me with great tenderness, with no ifs and buts, dear. For if you love me somewhat less, I'll hate your rotten guts, dear. All right, new headings. Reducing anger in close relationships. Since we have done marriage and family counseling for many years, people frequently ask us how they can check or control their anger at their spouses or at others with whom they have a close relationship. Well, they might. A famous marriage counselor, Dr. David Mace, pointed out in a valuable article in the Journal of Marriage and Family Counseling that conscious and unconscious feelings of anger probably interfere with love and disrupt more intimate ties than do any other causes. Dr. Mace rightly takes to task the marital fighting concepts of George Bach and his followers and points out that if you tend to argue and fight with your mate, you can use the REBT approach of dissolving and dissipating your anger rather than expressing it or diverting it. More concretely, he outlines three main methods of doing this. 1. Acknowledge your anger. Tell your partner, I feel angry at you, just as you would say, I feel tired or I feel frightened. 2. Renounce your anger as unhealthy. Even though your mate has treated you badly or unfairly, face the fact that you largely create your own anger, that you need not do so, and that you usually harm your relationships by feeling it and by expressing it against your partner. 3. Ask your partner for help. Show him or her that you have a problem in dealing with your anger and see if he or she can suggest some plans to help rid you of it and to make your relationship better. We highly endorse the above suggestions of Mace's. In a follow-up article to Mace's, I also published in the Journal of Marriage and Family Counseling, AE, add these additional REBT methods to help you deal with your anger at anyone with whom you have a marital or other close relationship. So 4, acknowledge your anger to yourself. Don't merely inform your mate about your angry feelings, but frankly tell yourself, look, let me face it, I really feel angry at my partner, not merely displeased, not merely annoyed at her behavior. I feel angry at my mate as a person. I feel condemning, demanding about him or her. Unless you do something like this, you will not feel in touch with your anger and will acknowledge it only through weak lip service. Once you acknowledge your ire to yourself and work at diffusing it, you may then choose or not choose to express it to your mate, depending on his or her vulnerability and on other special considerations. 5. Assume full responsibility for your anger. Do not hesitate to admit that you created it and that you angered yourself. Say to yourself something like, yes, my mate may have acted badly and treated me unfairly, but she only frustrated me, gave me what I didn't want. I made myself feel annoyed and irritated about his or her poor behavior, which are healthy negative feelings because I do honestly want him or her to act differently and feel sorry when he or she doesn't. But I also quite unhealthily made myself angry by commanding and whining that he or she must not act that way, has to do what I want, renders my whole life terrible and awful when he or she doesn't, and consequently is a thoroughly rotten person. I chose to think this way and thereby enrage myself at my partner. And I can, if I want to do so, choose to think differently and change my feelings of anger into healthier feelings of disappointment, sorrow, and annoyance. If you fully, in this manner, acknowledge your own responsibility for making yourself angry, you will, by that very admission, tend to rid yourself of a good part of your angry feelings. 6. Accept yourself with your anger. As soon as you condemn or damn yourself for having neurotic symptoms, anger, anxiety, depression, feelings of worthlessness, or anything else, you tend to interfere with ridding yourself of such symptoms. For if you see yourself as a worm or feeling, let us say, enraged at your mate, How can a total worm like you act unwormily? And while you keep berating yourself for stupidly making yourself angry, how can you have the time and energy to understand exactly what you told yourself to create your anger and to work at minimizing it? Accept yourself then with your anger. This does not mean, as some psychological writings imply, that you had better view angry feelings as good, healthy, and constructive. You can see them as normal in the sense that they are part of the human condition, an aspect of your human fallibility. But they still almost always defeat you, and as David Mace points out, tend to harm your intimate relationships. 7. Stop making yourself anxious, depressed, and self-blaming. As you learn to accept yourself, no matter how enraged you feel or how foolishly you act when angry, you can also learn to accept yourself with any of your other wrong or bad behaviors. If you do this, you will give up much of your vulnerability, the feelings of hurt and self-pity that often help you feel angry. Number 8, look for philosophic source of your anger. After fully acknowledging your feelings of anger, if you do not condemn yourself for having them, you can look for other philosophic sources. Realize, as shown throughout this book, that just about every time you feel enraged, you have a profound assumption behind rage, and that your assumption includes some should, ought, or must. Consequently, churches le should, churches le must. Look for the should, look for the must. In anger at your mate, you frequently hold the must of resentment. You must treat me kindly, considerately, lovingly, and approvingly, and the must of low frustration tolerance. The conditions under which I must live, the conditions under which I live must turn out nicely and non-frustratingly, so that I easily get practically everything I want without too much effort. More specifically, when enraged at your mate, you usually tell yourself, A, my partner must treat me considerately and lovingly. He or she actually behaves unfairly and disapprovingly. I can't stand this behavior. I find it awful. What a total rotter he or she is. And B, I join together with this mate in order to experience joy and happiness. But unpleasant conditions in our relationship exist. They must not continue to exist in this horrible way. How terrible that they do. I can't bear it. Mating is an absolutely frightful state, and I hate it, hate it, hate it. So look, and keep looking until you find your own shoulds, oughts, and musts about A, your mate, B, your children, C, the conditions under which you live, D, your in-laws, E, your sex relations with your mate, etc. As soon as you zero in on and clearly understand these musts, you locate the most important sources of your hatred and rage. As IAE and Dr. Robert A. Harper point out in A Guide to Successful Marriage. Number 9, distinguish your wishes about your mate and your relationship from your masturbatory commands. You can very legitimately tell yourself, I would much rather have sex with my mate twice a week than have it once every 2 weeks. But you can then foolishly add, and therefore he or she must have it the way I want it. Just about every one of your absolutistic demands on your partner has a somewhat realistic and reasonable wish or preference behind it. Search in your head and your heart for both the wish and the command that insists you have to fulfill or satisfy this wish. Separate the two very, very clearly. 10. Dispute and debate your absolutistic musts. You're merely understanding your demands on your mate and on the universe will not solve your problem. For you can easily say to yourself, oh, yes, I see now that I feel terribly angry toward my partner because I keep commanding that he or she do exactly what I prefer. Well, maybe I'd better give up those commands and translate them back into wishes. Fine, but not enough. Unless you very actively, persistently, and strongly dispute, question, and challenge those demands, you probably will never give them up. Only by making a thorough change in your philosophic assumptions, your absolutistic shoulds, will you probably reduce your angry feelings. And by reduce, we do not mean suppress, repress, avoid, sweep under the rug. We mean change them to healthy negative emotions instead of unproductive rage. 11. Employ behavioral and emotive means of undermining your feelings of anger. As noted throughout this book, and especially in chapters 9 and 10, you not only create or manufacture your own angry feelings, but then reinforce them by various emotive and behavioral acts. You therefore had better use forceful, dramatic, and active directive behavioral methods to reduce your anger. Thus, emotively, you can deliberately act lovingly rather than angrily to your mate. You can train yourself to empathize more effectively with your partner's point of view and feelings. You can practice what Carl Rogers calls unconditional positive regard, or what in REBT we call unconditional self-acceptance. You can use non-blaming I statements instead of condemning you statements about your mate's behavior. You can express your hostile feelings about your partner to other people, e.g. friends, rather than directly to him or her. You can role play some of your angry reactions to your mate. You can use rational emotive imagery to let yourself imagine your mate acting very badly. Let yourself feel angry at him or her, and then practice changing your feelings to disappointment rather than rage. As for behavioral methods, you can use several to help reinforce your anti-masturbatory attack on feelings of anger. You can deliberately stay in anger-inciting situations or court them to give yourself practice in coping with such conditions and in changing your hostility creating philosophies as you deal with them. You can practice assertiveness instead of passivity to ward off your building up unnecessary feelings of rage when you do not assert yourself with your mate. You can use operant conditioning to self-management methods to reward yourself when you react unangrily. You can employ behavior rehearsal methods and train yourself by working with role-playing partner to react more healthily when your mate does some presumably upsetting act. You can make written or oral contracts with your mate to do some things that he or she wishes you to do, provided that he or she will do other things that you would prefer. You can use relaxation, meditation, or other desensitizing and distraction methods to take yourself, at least temporarily, out of anger-arousing situations and give yourself extra time to work against your grandiose, commanding philosophies. In many different ways, then, you can apply the anger-reducing methods outlined in this book to acknowledge you are making yourself incensed at your love partner, and that to reduce your anger and enjoy more of the good feelings that your relationship may bring about.